And showing our global nature, I can now say hello to Robin Wattinger, who joins us from Hong Kong. Robin is the head of Asia, but also in charge of financing and investment. Morning, Robin.
Good morning, Nils.
And or it's afternoon in your side, I suppose. But in Düsseldorf, where Jeff Scott, who's our managing consultant and head of asset management. Jeff, how are you?
Very well, Nils. Good morning.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this day. We're speaking of PKF Hotel Expert Asset and Performance Management Services, one of our many service lines that we do. And the service line we believe to be important and relevant during normal times, but probably more important now when things go off the rail. One wants to see how one can react best and whatever. A lot of it is based on the contracts that are negotiated long before people get into this marriage of sometimes up to 30 years. They are negotiated, they are signed, and then often they are put away. And they live in a drawer, and they never really come out until things go airy and off the rails, and then then it's often too late. Now, when doing the work that you do and looking at these agreements, because often when you do these assessments, you need to look at agreements. What are, Jeff, to you the question, what are the most common areas you find where there is non-compliance with these contracts?
Yeah, I mean, as you touched upon, we recommend that now, but also in general, to really, pull out the contracts from the shelf or from the drawer. So we do find that quite often, certainly in good economic times, that the contracts are somewhat forgotten. But we're finding now, obviously, that people are looking at the contracts in more detail. And we do see an opportunity, with certain elements of a contract to maybe find areas where more alignment is possible. Since we're working for the owner, we're looking from the owner's side, but it should be a balanced contract. And there's various areas, opportunities where we see contracts. I mean, Robin, we've been working on an assignment, where I think it's quite construed. It's not always the case, but maybe you have a few examples.
Yeah, Robin, I mean, if I may pick up on that to add to the examples, what kind of financial impacts can they have? Because often these clauses, is a 0.5% here, 1% there, which some people would think, is it really that material?
Well, it adds up. It adds up, and it's often these individual items that sometimes are based on the contracts, where it's just a couple of basis points. But of course, over the years, these add up. Then there are fee items that in certain cases are questionable overall, that certainly add up. And in some cases, it's really items that, and I think Jeff will touch on that in a minute, that are calculated not by design or by
intention wrongly,
but just they are allocated wrongly, and that may lead to, for example, higher gross operating profit, which then may lead to higher incentive fees. So what we see, and we have seen contract and fee assessments where sort of the debatable fees may range from nowhere to up to 150, $200,000 per year.
That's a lot.
And that of course can make a substantial difference. In good years, as Jeff said, that may go unnoticed, but in bad years, it's certainly something that adds to the pain.
Yeah, talking about pain. I mean, these contracts are there to guide the relationship. It's almost like an anti-nuptial contract, to see what do we do when. But because they are more detailed than an anti-nuptial contract, how can one maybe improve that? Because to me, it sounds like there are often, as you say, misunderstandings, wrong allocations, and whatever. So are they practical? The ones that you've looked at recently, are they as practical as they can be? The implementation of those, does it make them easier, or is it really convoluted language that often people on the ground don't really get to grapple with?
Well, it's it could certainly be simplified. The question is whether we are the ones to make that decision. I mean, you know very well that all the large operators, they have very established and large groups of internal lawyers, legal counsels, etc., that work on nothing else than these contracts. So making them more simple would certainly be great, but I guess that's going to be wishful thinking. Nevertheless, we think that particularly when it comes to certain items that touch on alignment of interest, I think that's sort of where it comes down now. Also during the crisis, we mostly talk about alignment of interest really when it comes to the good times. A percentage of GOP that goes as an incentive fee to the operator. We talk about base fee that is part on total operating revenue. But what does it all mean if there is no total operating revenue? What happens if there is none or negative GOP? In various cases, we have probably not really thought about that to the same extent as we do now. And these may be items related to recurring fees that may or may not apply to the same degree when the asset is open or when it's closed. That may rely to who signs off on some of these invoices, how does the internal checks and balances work, etc., etc. And to me, that is certainly something from recent reviews, emphasizing that alignment of interest and checking contracts with a particular focus on that has been sort of a key focus.
Yeah. Look, I think it's something which we should maybe pick up with the many lawyers that we work with, because I do remember, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, one of the international operators proudly said that they reduced their contract down to a manageable document that was something like 15 pages, down from 50 or something like that, I seem to remember. And at the end of the day, I think one of these outcomes of this crisis is that we need to make this a living document that's easier to peruse, because it guides a relationship. It doesn't, it's meant to mean something to make that relationship work. As the basis of this, we've got something which, and I've got a copy of it here, which we call the Uniform System of Accounts for the Lodging Industry, also known as USALI. And a lot of those fees somehow are supposed to fit in there, and the basis. Jeff, the F in PKF, Mr. Foster was actually a co-author of the USALI way back in the 20s. And USALI is meant to be that global standard practiced by most brands and also individual hotels. Why is it important to have that standard, Jeff?
Yeah, so it serves as a common reporting standard. I mean, first of all, for benchmarking, certainly it's one element, but what we want to focus on here is also tied to fees. And I mean, we don't have time to go into review. And again, USALI is not, it's a reference guide. And there is the 11th version, which actually incorporates some changes which are quite important for owners of managed hotels. And basically, it gives a guideline in this case where certain revenues and also costs should be booked, which can have an impact on the calculation of fees. And we have found in especially when going into hotels at the start of an asset management assignment, or when we do one-off assignments, such as operational reviews or as our fee assessments as well, where we have noticed that revenues have been improperly accounted for. And one of them is, for example, for third-party services. You really have to look at that. I mean, it is kind of a gray zone defined in USALI, but in many cases, third-party revenues should not be booked in full as revenue, but rather, let's say, just the commission. And we have found, we're not talking about millions of dollars or euros, but these things add up. So we did find that revenues were basically being booked that shouldn't have been booked in at least in full, and therefore was inflating the revenue. And the same on the cost side. We had and we're talking here also about international hotel groups. With other smaller companies, they might not be following USALI, but in general, USALI is anchored in an international management contract. And again, coming back to the cost side, we have had situations where certain costs were being booked below GOP, which in fact should have been above GOP. And again, that has an impact on the GOP or AGOP, which is generally used as the basis for the calculation of incentive fees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, we don't have much time, but let's pretend I'm an owner, and I'm sitting here and I'm blissfully unaware that PKF Hotel Experts exist and that they have the service. Why would it be important to me? Because I love my brand. I'm happy with the brand. It's a fantastic logo on my building, and they're nice people, and the vice president comes to visit me every now and then, and everything is good. How would you tell me that I need you?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with owners, and our approach is really, to be, if needed. I mean, mediators is kind of that means there's something negative going on, so I wouldn't say mediators, but I mean, we work obviously on behalf of the owners, and especially if you have a management contract, the owner is basically giving up, their business to someone to operate the business, and in most cases, the risks might be somewhat limited, although that's again a contractual issue. But we definitely see the need for the owner. Either he has his own in-house or ability to do so, but basically, it's just innate the need to monitor the management. And again, this is not to say that obviously the reason we choose, and we're often quite involved in that choice as well, who should be operating the hotel, and we work very closely with international companies, and we see obviously the need for them, but it's just innate in human nature. It's always good to have someone asking critical questions, but again, it can be a situation where we're also supporting the owner in giving the argument or having them understand the owner's position, the operator's position as well, which I think is quite important. So it's a partnership, and I think that needs to be nurtured. And I mean, coming back to what we were talking about in terms of also contracts, and what we do see at the moment, and that's very positive from the operator side, is that operators are really providing some, especially at the moment, are showing flexibility in certain things in terms of some fees, and there again we see the opportunity now maybe to renegotiate some contract terms, either short-term or longer-term, with brand standards. They're showing flexibility. So I think that is showing the partnership on the side of the operator, which we think is very positive, especially in the present crisis.
So your role is one, as you say, not mediator, but translator, interpreter, and the grease between the cogs. You make the wheels move smoother and whatever. Guys, I'm really sorry, but the time has run out. So we should pick this up again. I think it's a subject that we can have many more discussions on, and I'm sure that there are many people out there who would love to hear from us again. I say thank you to Hong Kong, thank you to Düsseldorf, and we'll chat really soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Nils.
Thank you, Nils. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Rob.